Moving to Italy is a dream for many of you, and I know this because I'm often asked where in Italy is best to live. Now, in today's video, I've decided to share with you what no one will tell you about where to live in Italy, in the hopes that I can open your eyes a little bit to some of the aspects that people don't really consider when they are deciding where exactly in Italy to move to. Because although it is a very subjective choice and your decision will depend very much on your own personal circumstances, I do think that there are some factors that you must consider when you're deciding where in Italy could be best. And so I hope that this video can help you in making that decision. The first aspect that you need to consider that no one will tell you about when it comes to where to live in Italy is that living by the sea isn't all it's cracked up to be. Now, I totally get why you might want to live by the sea. It's really been a dream of mine since I moved to Italy to live as close to the sea as possible. Now, although I've lived in seaside cities before, Salerno and Palermo, I've never actually lived right beside the sea where I could actually see the waves crashing onto the beach. The closest that I came to being able to see the sea from my house was actually back in Palermo. Because we were on the top floor of our building, I used to be able to look out of our living room window, and where there was a gap in the buildings in front of our home, I could just make out the sea in the very far distance. So that was the closest I have come to being able to see the sea from my home, and it's a really, really beautiful thing. However, I also understand that it's not easy to live in seaside locations, which is why I wanted to kind of make sure this was the first aspect that I spoke to you about, because there is so much you need to consider. First and foremost, those seaside locations tend to be typical tourist destinations. So you have to factor in that pretty much from Easter onwards, right through to around September time, you are going to have an influx of tourists at different times throughout those months, meaning that your everyday experiences are going to change in some respects. There'll be more traffic, there'll be more people. You may also find that the beaches become extremely busy, chaotic, and even dirty during the summer months as well. And all of this means that it becomes quite stressful to live by the sea, even though it's the dream of many people. What you've also got to remember is that living somewhere which is popular with tourists naturally drives the cost of everything up. Not just the cost of housing in the first place, but also the cost of your services, of eating out, of doing any of those kinds of things. Everything just tends to be pricier because naturally you're in a place where tourists flock to. So this is something else that you have to think about. Not only that, but seaside locations tend to be very popular with Italians for having their second holiday homes. This means that Italian people will retreat to their second home in the long, hot, sunny summer months, and essentially as soon as the autumn hits, they will go back to their normal residence, which means you're going to have chunks of the year where maybe you won't have any neighbours living next to you because it is a second home. Now, on the one hand, that might be quite nice because you have a bit of peace and quiet during the year, but on the other hand, it can feel a little bit lonely, especially during the bleak winter months when you have like lots of houses all shuttered up and even some shops and businesses that aren't open because it's not high season. It does affect the sense of community that you can feel. And if living in an active, thriving community is important for you, this is something you're going to want to consider, because a lot of seaside locations are only thriving during spring and summer. As soon as late autumn hits, things start to quieten down a lot. And there may be a few people who live permanently in those places, but maybe not enough for them to give you the kind of energy and vibrancy that you might want from your life. So this is something that is very, very, very important to think about, because a lot of people will make their decision about where to live in Italy when they come here on holiday maybe, or they come here during the beautiful spring and summer months. But it really isn't the best decision to make at that time. You need to visit those seaside locations off season. So you need to come in November, December, January, February, and really decide if you still love those places at that time of the year as you did when it was really, really busy with people. This is going to give you a better idea and a flavour for what it could be like to live in those places long term. And I really think as well that those kinds of places are beautiful when it's beautiful weather, but when it's cold, living in a place like that can be pretty bleak. And so you do have to factor all of these decisions in, which is why I don't think that living by the sea is all it's cracked up to be. And I do think it's very hyped up and not necessarily what could be the best decision for you. So you must factor all of these things in if you're interested in living by the sea here in Italy. second aspect that some people will tell you about, but not everybody, is that the quality of life differs from north to south Italy. Now, this is something that I too have referenced on this channel, because many people will tell you that life here in the south of Italy is difficult. It's difficult because it tends to be the poorest part of Italy. It's difficult because career progression and job prospects are generally few and far between. It's difficult because there isn't as much investment made into this particular part of Italy as there is to the more northern parts. So there is this kind of division in Italy, and I think you must factor this into your decision, because depending on what you want to get from your experience of living here in Italy, you may be more attracted to the more northern parts of Italy than to the south. The number one question I'm asked on this channel is, why did I choose South Italy? And although I talk about it in a bit more detail in this video up here, I'll link it right now, I do believe that for me it was more of a connection. This is the reason why I chose this part of the world. But I recognise that it was a choice that has meant that I've had a few more challenges than I may have encountered had I chosen to live in more northern parts of this country. Because you see, in the south, life operates to a very different rule book. Things don't always work the way that you would expect them to. There are often lengthy delays in communication. Bureaucracy is an absolute nightmare pretty much most of the time. And it's just a strange kind of concept that you have to adjust to, the way of life here. Things do feel a bit slower, and the mindset and mentality of people can be really, really different to what you may have expected. And so you have these kind of challenges, if you like, that you have to brace yourself for if you plan to live in this particular part of the world. But for me, there are many, many, many advantages to living in this particular part of the world. And I feel like I've gained some of my greatest lessons from doing so. But then I have come here and I have allowed myself to be open to learning those lessons, and open to adapting, and open to being a part of this kind of lifestyle, which if you're not open to and you're not able to adapt, you could find very, very difficult indeed. So you've really got to think about this. There is a difference in quality of life. I haven't spent an exceptionally long time in the north of Italy. I have visited a couple of times, and honestly, although those visits were fairly short, I felt the difference immediately. I felt the order, I felt the organisation, I felt the investment. I felt in a way a little bit like I'd stepped back into London when I went to Bologna, for example, and those kinds of places, just for the organisation and just for the way that things seem to work. And unfortunately, that can't always be said for the south of Italy. So really and truly consider with your non-negotiables, because I talk about this a lot, what is important for you in terms of the quality of life you want to lead. Are you able to be patient and to adapt maybe to some inefficiencies and inadequacies? Or do you really want to have a bit more of an order and structure to things? And even though things sometimes still don't work in the north, because this is Italy, it's not a perfect fairy tale, you will find that maybe you will have less stress in that part of the world than you would here in the south. So again, you've got to decide what's important to you. But this is something that's a very, very important consideration. And I'm the first person to admit it's not easy to live here in the south of Italy. But then I love it for all the other aspects that I talk about on this channel, and for how raw and gritty it really is, because I think it teaches you something and you really feel the heart and soul of this country. But if you want something that's a bit more polished, albeit maybe a bit more expensive, then maybe the northern parts could be something that's better suited for you. The third aspect that not many people will tell you about when it comes to where to live in Italy is that capital cities aren't as special as you may think. Now, this might just be me, and please, comment below and tell me if you share the same viewpoint. But naturally, when you think of a capital city of a country or of an island, you expect that city to be the role model for the rest of the country. You expect it to be the creme de la creme of that particular place, where everything works and it's kind of the shining light for everybody else who lives in that place. However, here in Italy, it's not really the case. Rome is the capital city of Italy, and Palermo is the capital city of Sicily. And I have to be honest with you, those two cities are not perfect. Now, I've visited Rome before in the past, but I also know people who both live and work in that city, and they are the first people to tell me that it's not a clean city and that it can be extremely chaotic to move around the city as well, because it's very, very big and the public transportation system isn't perfect. And so it can be really, really difficult to live in that city, as well as it being extremely expensive, because of course it's the capital city of Italy and it's where a lot of tourists flock to every single year. So it's not an easy city to live in, and it's certainly not what you would expect representing the whole of Italy. Now, when it comes to Palermo, which I've had, experience of living in for over 2.5 years, I can tell you that as the capital city of Sicily, it really and truly is not what I expected. It's extremely dirty, it's inefficient, it's disorganized, and it is the craziest place I think I've ever lived in. And do you know, I would never have expected that from a capital city, which you think should pride itself on shining the light and leading the way. But this is the thing, capital cities here are really overrated. They are definitely not the perfect places that you might expect them to be. They are often really expensive, albeit I will say Palermo is an exception, because Sicily is generally a more kind of affordable place to live. Although you can find expensive parts, it's definitely not like it would be in Rome, for example. But essentially, it's not necessarily what you are going to expect. You need to get your expectations right for these places, because capital cities where you live may look very different to capital cities here in Italy. There is a different kind of level of importance placed on them, and really they're not necessarily as picture perfect and beautiful as you may have imagined when it comes to everyday living. Of course, to visit as a tourist, everything is beautiful and everything is dreamy and romantic, but when it comes to having to deal with everyday life and the kinds of things that you don't come into contact with as a tourist, that's when things can be a bit more challenging. And that's when I think that capital cities don't really live up to this kind of reputation that you might have expected them to. Aspect that not many people will tell you about when it comes to where to live in Italy is that Italy can be expensive as a country. Now, I feel like people are starting to realise this a little bit more now, but maybe they don't realise it enough, because you see there are certain parts of Italy that are really, really expensive compared to others. Milan, Bologna, like the northern parts of Italy, I would say are pretty expensive, because it tends to be where people flock to for work. It tends to be where the investment is made. And so as a result, it drives the price of everything up. Now, here in the south, you can find some expensive places. The Amalfi Coast, Cilento, even Salerno has become super pricey in recent years. So there are expensive parts of Italy, and which is why it pays for you to do your research, because Italy is not as cheap as you may have imagined it to be. Now, everything depends on what country you're coming from. If you're coming from America, if you're coming from the United Kingdom, if you're coming from a country where life is really, really expensive, then at first glance, Italy seems dead cheap. But when you start factoring in taxes and you start factoring in all these other costs that you may not have thought about at the very beginning, you start to realize that life here isn't as dead cheap as you may have initially thought. And it really does pay to decide where to live, because location is everything. In some places you can find an apartment for over €1,000 a month, but if you went to a different town, you could get that for half the price. So really and truly consider this. We really noticed this a lot when we were researching our move back here to the Salerno province, in terms of just how expensive Salerno has become as a city, and how apartments there were averaging upwards of €800-900 a month, even over €1,000 a month, which didn't really correlate with the space that was being offered for that price. So please do your homework. If you were to travel out even by 30 or 40 minutes from that city and you were to go to a neighbouring city, chances are you could pay a lot less and still be somewhere really, really beautiful. So you must do your research. Don't jump to the famous places that you know about here in Italy and think that they could be the best places to move to. Do your homework and budget, and do some comparisons as well. I love a bit of a comparison to see what, prices are like in different parts of Italy, because then you really get to see what your money can get you here in Italy, and whether or not you should be reconsidering your decisions based on the value for money that you're really, really going to get. The fifth thing you need to think about that not many people will tell you when it comes to where to live in Italy is that not all of Italy is actually well connected. Now, you've got to remember there are many different types of environment here in Italy. You've got the central cities, you've got the villages, you've got the countryside, you've got the seaside locations. But you see, the public transport system here in Italy is a little bit notorious. Some parts of Italy, it works better than in others. But essentially speaking, here in South Italy anyway, I would never live somewhere where I had to solely depend on a bus, for example. And let me explain to you why. Because here in South Italy, you don't have proper bus stops. You have a pole that's in the middle of the road with like the company name of the bus operator on top. No timetables, nothing. And you don't even know, if you're not from the area, the direction that the bus is coming in. If you're even standing at the right bus stop, for example, to go where you want to go, you have to do a lot of that research online. It's not easy to use the public transport system like buses, for example, when you're out of the city. And even in the city, it can be a disaster. Like, I had some right nightmares with bus companies in Palermo, for example. So you've really got to think about this. If you want to live in more remote places, you are going to need to drive, because if you are dependent solely on the buses, your life will become very limited. You won't be able to go out late at night. You might not be able to travel very much at weekends, depending on when the bus operates. It's going to really limit the quality of life that you can lead. Now, it's also the same for the trains as well, because some places are better served by trains than others. And with some cities that you live in here in Italy, you are completely connected to most of the country in terms of where the trains can actually go to. But then you've got to think about this in a couple of different ways. If you're not very savvy and you book your tickets at the last minute to do like some traveling around Italy, for example, chances are they can end up being pretty expensive. The best prices for train tickets tend to be when they're booked in advance, and as far in advance as you can. So it's not necessarily a cheap way to travel, although I will say it's far cheaper traveling by train here in Italy than it is in the UK, for example. However, other things you need to think about. If you live on an island, for example, Sicily, you are a little bit more restricted as to how you can move around, because you are going to be subject to the train, boat, or plane. And as a result, those kinds of companies tend to increase the prices dramatically, especially when it comes to the big festivals like Easter, Christmas, summer, because they know that there is a demand for people to both enter and exit the island. And whether or not this is right is something that is of much debate at the moment in Italy, but it is something that people experience. And, it's gotten to the point where special sleeper trains have been arranged to bring people from the north of Italy back to Sicily at a more affordable price. But those kinds of trains get booked up pretty much immediately as soon as the tickets become available, because it's such a problem. So really think about like your connections here in Italy. Don't just get lost in the beauty of a place. Think about the practicality of your everyday life. How are you going to reach the shops? How are you going to move around if you need to go to the hairdressers or the beauty shop, or you just want to move around and go somewhere different other than where you live? Really and truly think about this, because I think a lot of people come here and they move to places that are absolutely beautiful, like picture postcard perfect, right? However, when it comes to the way that they live their life, unless they drive, it's virtually impossible to live in those places. So please, please, please do your research. Italy is exceptionally beautiful, and there are so many incredible places that you can live in this country, but make sure that you are able to move around as independently as possible. Please don't move to a place and be solely dependent on the bus network or the train network. I just don't think that is necessarily a very wise decision. You need to have as many options open to you as possible if you don't want to drive here, for example. that not many people will tell you about when it comes to where to live in Italy is to consider your environment. This is something that I spoke about in this video up here, but really it was our recent move back to the Salerno province that highlighted for me just how important environment is. It will impact every single aspect of your life, from the way that you feel to the things that you actually end up doing where you live. Now, there are a few different categories that come under this umbrella term. The first is the ambience and community. So you need to consider the kind of feel that you have in the area that you're interested in moving to. Is there an active community? Are there shops and services that are open year round? Are there things to do? If not, am I within easy access of a neighbouring town or city where I can go and do those things? What can I get up to in my free time? Are there places of interest? Is there a lot to keep me occupied if I want to go out and about, for example? And, what does this place feel like? Does it feel peaceful? Does it feel crazy and chaotic? Does it feel like a place that I could relax in? Or does it feel like a place that I'll be constantly on edge? These are all questions you must ask yourself, because for every single town, city, village in Italy, there's going to be a different ambience and a different sense of community. And you have to find the place that best fits your definition of what you're looking for from your life here in this country. You also want to think about the quality of the facilities and services. Are you happy to travel out a little bit to have a wider range of shops and services? Or do you prefer to have them all at your fingertips in your city, in your town? What is it that you want? Do you want to have the kind of local feel where, everybody knows everyone and there are a few select shops that people tend to frequent, and it's not as kind of varied as it would be in the bigger cities? What is it that you want from your experience? Do you want to be sharing different restaurants and shops and services with tourists, for example? Like, are you happy to have those kind of tourist places in your town and city? What do you want? This is super important. You must consider this, because these are the aspects that will impact your everyday experience here in Italy. The third aspect is recycling. How important is it to you to recycle and want to live in a place that's pretty green, natured in that way? I hope your answer is going to be something like very important, but I have to be honest with you, if you live in a place where recycling doesn't really happen and people don't really respect the environment, that is really going to weigh on you, and it's going to make you feel pretty shitty about where it is that you live. Now, of course, when I lived in Palermo as a city, it's a little bit divided, because the entire city doesn't recycle. It's something that is slowly being introduced into different neighbourhoods. But you have vast chunks of the city where people just throw whatever they want away into these big metal bin containers that are on the side of the street that people can just throw whatever they want in, and nobody really bothers to recycle. You might have the odd glass bank or the odd clothing bank, but they're never emptied, and so they're usually overflowing onto the streets, which makes it very difficult for people to recycle every single day, unless you make a visit to the recycling centre, which many people in Palermo don't bother to do. And so you've got to think about this. Like, if recycling is an important aspect for you, then you want to live somewhere which is a bit greener. Like where we've moved to now, everyone recycles and it's beautiful. And this city is really focused on being really green and, trying to improve itself in an environmentally sustainable way. And I love that. And I realised just how much I missed not recycling in those 2.5 years, and I'm back to it now, and I realise it makes me feel so much better as well. It gives me an awareness of the kind of things that I consume, because I can see how I'm separating my waste every single day. And it's this, isn't it? This all adds into your quality of life, and it all adds into how your environment impacts you. If you don't want to live in a dirty place, a place where people don't show love and respect for where they live, you might want to start avoiding those bigger cities. If you want to live in a place where people tend to have a bit more respect for their surroundings, you might want to start looking at the smaller towns and villages. It's this. You've got to start weighing up your options and deciding what is important for you when it comes to your environment and how it makes you feel. So I hope this video has helped you to think about some of those aspects that we don't really often talk about when it comes to where to live in Italy. And if you're interested in diving a bit deeper into what everyday life here is like in South Italy, then why not consider joining the Aperitivo Lounge? This is my channel membership, and you can find out all the information about what you get in that membership in this video up here. I will see you in the next video.